The Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Cabinet Ministers and Assistant Ministers, the Honourable Leader of Opposition, Honourable Members of Parliament. Allow me first to thank God for this place, time and opportunity, that all of us have been called to such a place and for such a time as this. Before I move on with my contribution to the debate, as Gasini Bonua Wanaturang Balakon Ratu, I mourn the loss of Ratu Kolnyo, Rokutina Deboravoka, youngest son and later younger brother to successive paramount chiefs of my Bonua of Barata. If not for the parliamentary sitting today, I would have been at Rudin Bonua carrying out my traditional duties. I also convey condolences to the Bonua Sukanadangi on the passing of their paramount chief, Turana Tivitong. May they both rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, sir, I add my congratulations on your elevation to the Speaker's chair. It was historically not an enviable seat, as we learned when watching the ceremony of the dragging of the Speaker on the previous occasion we met in this august chamber. We have confidence that your experience as one of the longest-serving parliamentarians, winning a seat in the preceding 5 general elections in 1999, 2001, 2006, 2014, and 2018 mean that you are more than equal to the task. Before I respond substantively to His Excellency's most gracious address, with particular focus vis-à-vis the portfolio I have been entrusted by the Honourable Prime Minister, I wish to begin by thanking His Excellency. I also wish to acknowledge the dignity and decorum with which His Excellency has carried himself as head of state in the recent fraught period leading into and immediately after the general election that closed out 2022. For many of us, learning constitutional parliamentary norms, standing orders and conventions will be a steep learning curve, but we have confidence in the leadership team of the coalition government and look forward to robust debate with His Excellency's loyal opposition. I would not be here making my maiden address to this august House if not for the trust and confidence of every single voter who saw fit to elect me to this position. And so, my first vote of thanks on this earthly plane at least go out to all my voters primarily in Tailevu North, but indeed everywhere in Fiji they voted for me. I am truly humbled. There is a saying in the indigenous vernacular, Gorongoro and Mateulupana, translated literally as a parent wondering at his own child's face, but taken to mean a close relative praising another, something culturally considered unseemly. Nonetheless, the home base of my support is none other than that of my own family. My beautiful wife and campaign manager, Salote, and her siblings and their families. She and I both acknowledge all those supporters in Fiji and abroad, volunteers and party officials who assisted in the campaign, chief among them being Simone Samati of Korodau the Konrove, who has become like a member of our family. In mentioning the campaign, my wife and I became grandparents in the early stages of the Alliance Party's formation, and a special mention must be made of our precious granddaughter, Lotiola, who brings us so much joy. It was not easy juggling the demands of campaigning as a candidate, responsibilities of General Secretary, as well as life generally, and as a new grandparent. And I thank the Prime Minister for his unwavering trust in and support of me. I acknowledge the support of our children, Makelesi, Levani, Fatafehi, Mele, Esitia, and Jolinda. Not forgetting our sons-in-law, Butoka and Tonga, and nephews, Jason, Koya, Sakiasi, and Tulele. The wider extended families of my in-laws, my late siblings, Choeli, Sulias, and Chone, and my sole surviving sibling, Tupo, and their respective families and in-laws. I honor my own parents-in-law, my late mother-in-law, Josephine Ongalia, originally from Lapaha, Mua, Tongatapu, in the Kingdom of Tonga, and my late father-in-law, Chekapirus Wakula, from Nomuka, Teombau, Mbau Teleu. I also honor my late uncle, Sekius Raktakala, and aunt, Makelesi Wara, who are my guardians at Bunbokon District School, both of whom helped shape the person I am today. I honor my own parents, my late father, Dr. Sakiasi Ditoka, and our Yagusa on the Wiko, our Vanua Verata, Sanokonoko, Vanuan Turambala Ratu. I especially acknowledge other Vanua with strong links to Ndaviko in other villages through Tailevu North and other places around Fiji. I remember my late mother, Mele Langilangi Tiki Loma Loma, and her connections in Tumbou, Lakemba and Dakwilo Oniata, in Lao of Matangalis Diakana and Tabanga, in the Abusa and Hono of Lakemba and Bukatatano respectively. My father's Wasu through my Tayaleni of Nakaw in 90. My father's siblings and their families, all our much beloved extended family from the villages of Tamabua, Sanasana, Naiwurwuru, Lomawai, Wailebu, Nangarani, and our own Nawinimono. My mother's Wasu through my Puro Kolutu, also of Tumbo Lakemba. All my mother's siblings from the chiefly Tikamba Busrandavi clans of Mbao, Wonirawa, Oniwai, and their Kana clans of Lakemba, respectively. I'm not a fan of autobiographical speeches, but will provide the House a short self-introduction. I began primary education following my physician father in his various postings at Viuta Primary School, Suva, South Pacific Sugar Mills Primary School in Rarawai, Mba, before joining Vunbokoi District School, where I was classmates with my predecessor and Tavale, Honorable Inyasir Ratu. My secondary education began at Lilin Memorial School at Ndabuilebu, where the Honorable Chonios Tumate was my senior. I then concluded my secondary learning at the Maris Brothers High School in Flagstaff. I joined the Royal Fiji Military Forces in 1985 and attained the rank of captain by 1990. I seek the indulgence and forbearance of my late maternal grandmother's chiefly clan of the Bonirawa in recounting my distinct privilege of serving whilst an army captain as an aide-de-camp to the father of modern Fiji, the late Ngon Turang Bal Natunyao, Tilau, Soni Bonolau, Rodu Sukamsesit, Kapewai, Timatalei Mara. Chiefly Mana or Sau were personified in this late paramount chief and elder statesman, who led us to independence and eventually served as president of the Republic with distinction. Many skills were honed and lessons learned under his sharp and discerning gaze, and not so soft rebuke were warranted. Not to mention his late wife, the Ngon Marambal Rokatundaketi, and the indirect tutelage of traditional diplomacy that she conveyed. The Turanga Tuineau's fiery temper suffered no foolishness, and her sharp wit knew no equal. May the Turanga and Maramambale continue to rest in blessed memory. I also served as a captain as personal staff officer, Mr. Speaker, under Commander RFMF Ratu Epeli Nganilau, as he then was, yet another chiefly leader who I had the privilege of observing at close quarters, and from which many lessons were gleaned. I acknowledge him and his late wife, Andi Ateda Mwadi Wangamara. May she continue to rest in peace. I finally attained the rank of major, and in 2002 served until I sought resignation and was honorably discharged from what had then become the regular force of the Republic of Fiji Military Forces into the reserve of officers, when I was offered the position of private secretary in the office of the Prime Minister by the Venerable Mr. Chochi Kotambalau. This was in the administration of the late Turanga Tuikumbuda, Mr. Lacey Ngarse. Mr. Ngarse was yet another late statesman from whom I gained immeasurably, not just in terms of leadership and integrity, but on a personal level, when I and his police PPOs from the special branch, with the loyal support of the Fiji Police Force then, organized Mr. and Mrs. Ngarse's extraction from Suva after the overthrow of the SDL government in 2006. As Mr. Ngarse had correctly predicted, sir, the true cleanup begins now. That is the reality of the matter. I acknowledge Mrs. Lamba Ngarse and her family for their unwavering support for the Turanga Tuikumbuda and the values he stood for. May he also rest in beloved memory. Upon return to Suva, my family struggled with my wife's single income, while all civil service jobs were closed to me. In the intervening years, 2 of my 3 surviving siblings sought asylum abroad, as their connection to me appeared to be a red rag to a bull for some. I tried my hand at farming, whilst also attaining my master's in commerce in governance at the University of the South Pacific. Farming remains one of my passions today. I then gained employment in the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat until 2019, where I opted to take my FNPF payout while seriously considering, together with my family, the weighty decision of entering into politics, leading to this very place and time. I reiterate what I said at the outset and return all the glory and honor of this, my life's journey, to our Creator, Almighty God and Sovereign Lord, without whom none of this would have been possible to begin with. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I now turn to my substantive response to His Excellency's most gracious address. I am deeply honored by the show of confidence bestowed upon me by the Honorable Prime Minister in assigning to me the portfolio of rural and maritime development and natural disaster management. To a certain extent, Gorongoro and Matelubena may apply here as well, but nonetheless, I would like to pay tribute to my party leader and Prime Minister, the Honorable Sitibeni Lingma Mantarambuka. His decisive leadership style can be best exemplified by his recent diplomatic accomplishment in bringing Kiribati back into the embrace of the Pacific Islands Forum, and more broadly, setting the tone for future engagements with our Pacific neighbors. In the short time I have worked directly under his guidance, I am confident that there is no better person to lead us in this daunting yet exciting new chapter in Fiji's journey of nationhood. Honorable Speaker, sir, I applaud the decision to introduce elections for the district advisory councils. This localization of democracy empowers rural and formal settlements and communities by allowing them to choose their own representatives. This initiative will address other issues, including proper demarcation of settlements and DAC constituency boundaries. Elections of district advisory councillors will ensure that the voices of the rural informal settlements are heard. It also ensures that councillors are accountable to the people they represent. In fact, they provide the links between communities and government in promoting and facilitating the implementation of government programs and projects at the community level. Honorable Speaker, sir, His Excellency recognized the rights of the indigenous people of Fiji, and I celebrate the decision to restore the Mbosilewa Turanga, traditionally the apex of the Vanua. Indeed, the restoration of the Great Council of Chiefs does not seek to place indigenous rights above those of other communities, but to paraphrase the late Honorable Justice Jairam Reddy, it is a body for all people who call Fiji home. The recent Veisiko of visitation to His Excellency the President by the Vanua of Mbau and the viral picture of Turanga Toke Mbolatangane and the Turanga Toke Matewelangi expressing themselves in joyful greeting is a beautiful reminder of the good times we have ahead of us. We have had a long and grueling campaign, and harsh words have been exchanged by all parties. It is now time to pool our resources and work together for the good of our beloved Fiji. For our country, it is vitally important as a factor for long-standing stability that we always maintain a careful balance between the rights of individuals and communities. The special interests of indigenous people, including the right of ownership to their natural resources, must also be protected. The interests and equitable participation in all facets of life in Fiji for the Itoke is essential for the long-term peace, stability, and sustainable development in the country. Given the above, anything that affects them must affect the nation. Honorable Speaker, sir, Fiji's population was once concentrated in the rural areas and maritime islands. About 67% of Fiji's population lived in the rural areas in 1966. By 2019-2020, this had dropped to 45%. These areas constitute 94% of the total land area, and the rural economy has the largest resource base, which includes tourism, agriculture, and sugar, which contributes significantly towards the national GDP and the economy. Honorable Speaker, sir, as has been oft mentioned in national discourse, our rural areas are resource-rich, but the majority are cash poor because we have been slow to appreciate the potential wealth and economic gains that we can derive from the sustainable use of our natural resources. All efforts must now be made to unlock the potential to generate wealth in order to improve the living standards and the quality of lives of all citizens, to address food security, and to reduce our import bills while boosting our exports. Honorable Speaker, sir, the 2017 National Census report showed that out of the 15 sources of water that are commonly used for drinking across rural households in Fiji, only 35% are connected to metered tap water, and about 10% relies on high-risk water sources. In addition, about 31% of rural households use high-risk sanitation in Fiji. The Constitution guarantees all the people of Fiji the right of access to clean and safe water in adequate quantities and access to adequate sanitation facilities. This is therefore a priority area for the ministry. The issue of rural to urban drift has become a major challenge in Fiji as a rural population and households migrate to urban areas in search of better standards of living, quality education, facilities, accessibility to health centers, housing and recreational activities. This was also driven by the fact that around 37% of the rural population were living below the poverty line compared to 14% in the urban areas, as noted in the revised 2019-2020 Household Impact and Expenditure Survey report. To address these issues, government will intensify efforts to create more opportunities in the rural areas. Today, poor infrastructural facilities are identified as a problem. It is important to know that most of the population living in the rural areas that are characterized by lack or poor infrastructural facilities, such as electricity and good roads, potable drinking water, a good communication system, health centers, etc. The absence of these facilities makes life difficult, miserable, and unattractive in the rural areas. The Ministry is embarking on the process to develop the National Rural Development Policy. The policy is to guide and set the model, concepts, and strategies for rural and maritime development in Fiji. Rural development policy can be broadly defined as all aspects of state action that directly or indirectly influence the nature of economics and social development in the rural areas. On the same note, the Ministry will play a lead role through the Integrated Rural Development Framework to coordinate rural development programs amongst a number of government agencies, non-government organizations, civil societies, and the private sector to develop and enhance sustainable livelihoods for Fiji's rural sector. The IRDF is a coordinated bottom-up development planning process that is integrated with the top-down aspirations of government that are evidence-based driven. It aims to promote participatory, inclusive cooperation between all institutions, partners and stakeholders at the national and local levels involved in rural development planning. The long-term objective of Rural Outer Island Investment, or the ROI, is to enhance the livelihoods of people in the rural areas and outer islands of Fiji. The immediate purpose is to increase market access opportunities and services that will enable beneficiaries in the rural areas and outer islands to exploit these opportunities. There is potential to grow our economy and improve the living standards of our rural people. This forms the core of this ministry's deliverables, particularly in unlocking these opportunities and developing new ones to assist rural communities raise their living standards. Honorable Speaker, sir, against this backdrop, this ministry is committed to implementing development strategies that bring Fijians living in rural areas the same level of access to essential services and economic opportunities as elsewhere in the country. As a rural development facilitator and coordinator, the ministry, through partnership with other rural development stakeholders, is committed to improving the quality of people's lives, as well as expanding their ability to be masters of their own future in rural and developed regions in our country. This can be achieved through the provision of economic and income-generating opportunities and improving access to amenities and services. Honorable Speaker, sir, substantial resources will continue to be directed towards developing the rural and maritime areas, particularly our most vulnerable and isolated communities. Such activities include the construction and improvement of community facilities, water supply, housing, social welfare services, marketing and distribution networks. Honorable Speaker, sir, I am excited about the decision to transfer the Rural Housing Assistance Program and the Rural Outer Island Program to this ministry. The Rural Housing Assistance Scheme was first established in 1976 with the main objective of providing assistance to the rural population to improve living conditions and reduce vulnerability to natural disasters. Honorable Speaker, sir, over the last decade, Fiji has experienced a total of 14 cyclones and flood events which cumulatively accounted for over 70 deaths and damages over 3.13 billion Fiji dollars. The climate vulnerability assessment conducted reveals that the government will require about 9.3 billion Fiji dollars in investment over the next 10 years to strengthen resilience, which is almost 100% of its annual GDP. Honorable Speaker, sir, this ministry, through the National Disaster Management Office, will continue its efforts to improve our nation's disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation initiatives. I would particularly wish to mention that disaster rehabilitation would be an area the Ministry intends to revisit and rebuild capacity in. The 1995 National Disaster Management Plan and the 1998 Natural Disaster Management Act will both be reviewed in order to achieve this. We will work to improve stakeholder coordination mechanisms and accomplish the goals of the 2018 to 2030 National Disaster Reduction Policy. Before I resume my seat, I restate my unequivocal support of the motion and commend it accordingly to the House. Honourable Speaker, sir, honourable members of Parliament, I thank you for your attention and indulgence.